Chapter 12. Where's Mama? Mr. Rosen tripped on the loose step outside the kitchen door. His wife grasped his arm, and he regained his balance. Whew! It's very dark, Mama whispered, as they stood in the yard with their blankets and their bundles of food gathered in their arms. And we can't use any light. I'll go first. I know the way very well. And you follow me. Try not to stumble over the tree roots in the path. Feel carefully with your feet. The path is uneven. And be very, very quiet, she added unnecessarily. The night was quiet, too. A slight breeze moved the tops of the trees. From across the meadow came the sound of the sea's movement, which was constant sound here and had always been. But no birds called or cried here now. In the night, the cow slept silently in the barn, the kitten upstairs in Christie's arms. There were stars here and there, dotting the sky among the thin clouds, but no moon. Anne Marie shivered, standing in the front steps. Come, Mamma murmured, as she moved away from the house. One by one, the Rosens turned and hugged Anne Marie silently. Anne Marie came to her last. The two girls held each other. I'll come back some day, Ellen whispered fiercely. I promise. I know you will, Anne Marie whispered back, holding her friend tightly. Then they were gone. Mamma and the Rosens and Anne Marie was alone. She went into the house crying suddenly and closed the door against the night. The lid of the casket was closed again. Now the room was empty, and there was no sign of people who had sat there for those hours. Anne Marie wiped the backs of her eyes with her back of her hand. She opened the dark curtains and the windows. She curled up more in the rocker, trying to relax and trace the route in her mind. She knew the old path, too, not as well as her mother, who had followed it almost every day of her childhood, with her dog scampering behind. But Anne Marie had often walked to town and back that way. She remembered the turns, the twisted trees, those whose gnarled roots pushed through the earth and then into knotted clumps and then thick bushes that often flowered in the early summer. She walked with them in her mind, feeling the way in the darkness. She would take them, she thought, half an hour to reach the place where Uncle Henrik was waiting with his boat. Mamma would leave them there, pausing a moment, no more, for a final hug, and then she would turn and come home. It was as the Rosens, unfamiliar with the path, slowly felt their way along. Mamma would hurry, sure-footed, now back to her children. The clock in the hall struck once. It was 1:30 in the morning. Her mother would be home in an hour. Anne Marie decided. She rocked gently back and forth in the chair. Mamma would be home by 3:30. She thought of Papa back in Copenhagen, alone. He would be awake too. He would be wishing he could have come, but knowing too that he must come and go as always, to the corner store for the newspaper, to his office for the morning when the morning came. Now he would be afraid for them, and watching the clock, waiting for word that the Rosens were safe, that Mamma and the girls were here on the farm, starting a new day with the sun shining through the kitchen window and the cream on their oatmeal. It was harder for the ones who were waiting, Anne Marie knew. Less danger, perhaps, but more fear. She yawned and her head nodded, and she fell asleep. And it was a sleep as thin as night clouds, dotted with dreams that came and went like stars. Light woke her, but it was not really morning. Not yet. There was only the first hint of the slightly lightening sky, the pale gleam of the edge of the meadow, a sign that far away, somewhere to the east, where Sweden was, still slept. Morning will be coming soon. Dawn would creep across the Swedish farmland and coast, and it would be like little Denmark with light and move across the North Sea to wake Norway. Anne Marie blinked in confusion, sitting up, remembering after a moment where she was and why. But it was not right. The pale light at the horizon, it should still be dark. It should still be night. She looked stiffly, stretching her legs, and went to the hall to look at the old clock. It was past 4 o'clock. Where was Mamma? Perhaps she had come home and not wanted to wake Anne Marie, and she had gone to bed herself. Surely that was it. Mamma must have been exhausted. She had been up all night and made the dangerous journey to the boat and then returned through the dark woods, wanting only to sleep. Quickly, Anne Marie went up the narrow staircase to the door of the bedroom where she had slept with Ellen. It was open. The two small beds were neatly made, covered with an old quilt, and empty. Beside it, Uncle Henrik's door was open too. His bed was unused and empty. Despite her worry, Anne Marie smiled slightly when she saw some of Uncle Henrik's clothes crumpled in a chair and a pair of shoes caked with barnyard dirt lying on the floor. He needs a wife, she said to herself, imitating her mamma. The door to the other bedroom, the one Christy and Mamma were sharing, was closed. Quietly, not wanting to wake them, Anne Marie pushed it open. The kitten's ears moved suddenly, standing up straight. Its eyes opened wide, and it raised its head and yawned. It pried itself out of Christie's arms and stretched, and then jumped lightly to the floor and came to Anne Marie. It rubbed itself against her leg and purred. Christie sighed and turned in her sleep. One arm free, now the kitten warmth and comfort flung across the pillow. There was no one else in the wide bed. Anne Marie moved quickly to the window, which overlooked the clearing that led to the path's entrance. The light outside was still very dim. She peered through the dimness, trying to see, looking for the opening of the trees where the path began, looking for Mamma hurrying home. After a second, she saw a shape there, something unfamiliar, something that had not been there the day before, a huge shape, a dark shape, no more than a blurred heap. At the beginning of the path, Anne Marie squinted, forcing her eyes to understand, needing to understand, not wanting to understand. As the shape moved, she knew it was her mother lying on the earth.